Sarah sat in the candle-lit restaurant, laughing softly as she clinked her wine glass against Peter's. Her red dress hugged her figure perfectly, her long hair cascading over her shoulders as she leaned in closer to him. The way she smiled, at him, playful, teasing, was the same way she used to smile at me. But the difference? The credit card that had paid for this extravagant dinner was mine. I leaned back in the private booth, hidden in the shadows, my fingers tightening around the whiskey glass. The same woman who used to whine about saving money, who once told me she hated men who wasted cash on luxury, was now sitting across from another man, indulging in $1,000 meal at my expense. She had told me she was going out with her friends tonight. Said she'd be home late because one of them had broken up with her boyfriend and needed support. What a joke. She twirled her wine glass between her fingers, tilting her head at Peter, her voice dripping with honey. You always take me to the best places, always? So this wasn't their first time. A slow smirk curled on my lips as I picked up my phone and sent a single message. A minute later, the restaurant manager walked toward their table. Peter, unaware of what was coming, casually poured another glass of wine, completely oblivious to the fact that everything was about to change. I swirled my drink lazily, waiting. The manager cleared his throat. Excuse me, sir, miss. I'm afraid there's been a change in ownership. Sarah's smile faltered. What? I stood up from the booth, stepping into the dim glow of the chandeliers. The moment Sarah saw me, her face drained of color. Slipped my hands into my pockets, tilting my head slightly. You're sitting in my restaurant. Sarah's eyes widened as if she had seen a ghost. The color drained from her face, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. Peter, on the other hand, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and irritation, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I took slow, measured steps toward them, my gaze never leaving Sarah's. She was still frozen, gripping the table as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Robert, her voice was barely above a whisper, her usual confident tone replaced by something closer to fear. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the way she squirmed under my gaze. Then, I pulled out the chair across from them and sat down, leaning back, like I had all the time in the world. I have to say, I mused, picking up Peter's untouched glass of whiskey and swirling it lazily, I never expected you to have such expensive taste. I glanced at the bottle of wine, the aged steak, the imported truffle pasta, everything she used to call unnecessary spending when we were together. Sarah's throat bobbed as she swallowed, but she quickly recovered, her expression hardening. What are you doing here? I took a sip from the glass, savoring the burn before answering. That's a good question. Maybe I was in the mood to buy something tonight. I let my gaze flick toward the manager who was standing nearby, waiting. Oh, wait. I already did. Sarah's fingers curled against the tablecloth. What do you mean? I exhaled a small chuckle. I mean, this restaurant is mine now. I just bought it. Signed the deal this afternoon. Didn't take long. I gestured around the room. So technically, you're having dinner in my place, spending my money. I leaned in slightly, my tone dropping lower. I just came to see what I was paying for. Peter's expression twisted with irritation. Look, I don't know what your problem is, but we're having a private dinner. If you're the owner now, shouldn't you be focusing on running your business instead of interrupting customers? Sarah's eyes darted to Peter, a silent warning flashing in them, but he ignored it. I tilted my head, studying him. He was dressed. Well, expensive suit, expensive watch, but he had the arrogance of a man who thought he was the one spending money tonight. That made me laugh. I turned back to Sarah. Does he know? Sarah stiffened. Know what? I smiled, slow and mocking. That every single thing you've ever bought with that credit card you're using tonight came from my bank account. Peter's posture shifted slightly. I saw the first flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, his gaze flickering between Sarah and me. Sarah? He said, his voice suddenly cautious. Sarah clenched her jaw. This isn't the time or place, Robert. I hummed, amused. Is that right? because from where I'm sitting it seems like the perfect time. I glanced at Peter, whose hand had now moved away from his glass, his fingers pressing against the table. She didn't tell you, did she, that she's been living off my money this whole time? Peter's expression darkened. You're lying. I shrugged. You can check the transaction history yourself. Every designer bag, every 5-star hotel stay, and yes, every dinner you've taken her to in places like this. Paid for by me. Sarah's face had gone pale. That's not true, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I have my own. Money. I let out a short, sharp laugh. Your own money? I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen a few times before holding it up. You mean this account? The one I funded when you told me you were saving? Up for your own business? Peter leaned forward slightly, looking at the screen. The bank transactions didn't lie. Thousands of dollars, all from my account. Sarah's hands trembled in her lap, and for the first time that night, she looked small, defeated. Peter pushed back his chair, his jaw tightening. You told me you were independent. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came out. I smirked, watching the cracks form in the perfect illusion she had built. Then I stood up, straightening my suit jacket. Enjoy your meal, Peter. You might want to split the bill tonight, though. I turned to the manager. Make sure her card gets declined. Sarah's head snapped up. You wouldn't I? I cut her off smoothly. You see, Sarah, I don't pay for things I no longer own. And with that, I walked away, leaving her to pick up the shattered pieces of her carefully constructed lie. I didn't bother looking back as I walked out of the restaurant, but I could hear the hushed whispers, the sharp edge of Sarah's voice trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. Peter didn't follow me. He was still sitting there trying to piece together the reality of the situation. I stepped into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly as the night air cooled my burning anger. My phone buzzed, and I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Sarah. I let it ring. Then, after the 5th time, I picked up, but I didn't say a word. Robert, she breathed, her voice a mixture of desperation and anger. What the hell was that? I let out a slow exhale. You tell me, Sarah. What exactly did you think was going to happen? That you'd keep taking my money, keep spending my savings on another man, and I'd just sit back and let it slide? She scoffed, but there was no confidence behind it. You're being ridiculous, I laughed humorlessly. Am I? You humiliated me in front of Peter. You humiliated yourself. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. You lied to me. You lied to him. And worst of all, you lied to yourself, thinking you wouldn't get caught. A heavy silence stretched between us. Then her voice came through, softer this time. Robert, it's not what you think. Then tell me, Sarah, I said, leaning my head back against the car seat, my patience wearing thin. Tell me why the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, took my money and spent it on someone else. She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I shook my head. That's what I thought. Robert, I never meant to. You never meant for me to find out. I cut her off coldly. Silence. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. I let out a quiet chuckle, more at myself than at her. You know, Sarah, I always thought you were different. Her breath hitched. I hung up because there was nothing left to say. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone had over a dozen missed calls, not just from Sarah, but from mutual friends, from numbers I didn't recognize. My social media was flooded with messages, half of them gossip, the other half telling me to check Sarah's latest post. I should have ignored it. But curiosity won. I tapped on her profile, and the first thing I saw was a picture of her, sitting by the window looking heartbroken. The caption? Some people will destroy you just because they can't handle seeing you happy. I thought we were better than that. I clenched my jaw. Unbelievable. She was playing the victim. The comments were already flooded with support. Friends, strangers, all sympathizing with her heartbreak. I scrolled further and found another post, this time a picture of her and Peter. At least some people still know how to treat me right. That was all it took. The anger that had dulled overnight reignited, sharp and scorching. She wanted to act like she was the one who had been wronged? Like she was the victim? Fine. Let's see how much she still enjoys playing queen when her throne is pulled out from under her. I called my lawyer. Robert, he greeted, sounding surprised. Everything okay? I need you to move up the settlement for the properties I own. There was a pause. The properties? You mean the apartment Sarah's living in? I smiled coldly. That's the one. My lawyer exhaled slowly. You're sure about this? Positive. Because if Sarah thought last night was bad, she hadn't seen anything yet. The night felt longer than usual. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, but sleep never came. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, Sarah's words kept replaying in my head. Robert, it's not what you think. It was funny, really. She still thought she could manipulate me, twist reality to make herself look like the victim. But the truth was right there, written in red ink on the receipts she had no idea I had seen. She had been spending my money on another man, and not just once. The transactions weren't small. Private suites, shopping sprees, first-class trips. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I had been blind, willingly blind. The signs had always been there, but I ignored them, convinced myself that Sarah was just the same woman I had fallen in love with. That she still looked at me the way she used to. But last night, when she looked at me across the restaurant, there was no love in her eyes. Only panic. Only fear of getting caught. I turned onto my side, staring at the unopened messages on my phone. Some from Sarah, some from mutual friends, no doubt asking what had happened. A part of me wanted to delete everything, erase her completely. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. By morning, I was ready. I got dressed, fixed my tie, and walked into my lawyer's office like I was sealing the easiest deal of my life. He looked at me over his glasses, setting down a stack of papers. You're sure about this? I nodded. Every last detail. He sighed but didn't argue. The eviction notice will be sent today. Since the apartment is in your name, legally, she has 30 days to leave. I leaned back, tapping my fingers against the desk. Make it 15. My lawyer raised a brow but nodded. 15 then. I knew Sarah. She had spent years wrapping herself in comfort, living in luxury without having to lift a finger. But when that was taken away, when she was forced to face the reality of her actions, she'd break. And for the first time, she'd realize that I was done saving her. It didn't take long. That evening, I got the call. I was sipping my coffee when my phone rang, Sarah's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring. Then, just when it was about to stop, I picked up. Silence. Then, her voice, soft, desperate. Robert, well, what's going on? I took a slow sip of my coffee. You got the notice. Her breath hitched. You're kicking me out? Why are you acting surprised? I asked casually. It's my apartment. I'm just taking back what's mine. Robert, please, she whispered. You don't have to do this. I chuckled, shaking my head. But I do, Sarah. You see, I've been doing a lot of things I didn't have to do for a long time. Paying your bills, funding your lifestyle, taking care of you when you did absolutely nothing in return. I leaned back. But all of that? That ends today, she sniffled. I don't have anywhere else to go. Not my problem. She had Peter, didn't she? The man who took her out to all those fancy restaurants, the one she spent my money on? I stayed silent, waiting. Then finally she broke. Her voice trembled. I made a mistake. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the words I had once wanted to hear. But now, they meant nothing. I opened my eyes, my voice calm. "Yes, Sarah. You did." And then, without another word, I hung up. I thought that would be the last time I'd hear from her. That once reality settled in, once she realized that she had no safety net left, she'd finally understand what she had done. But Sarah was never one to accept defeat easily. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but when the same number called again an hour later, I finally answered. "Robert." I knew that voice instantly. I exhaled slowly. "Sarah, please, just listen to me." Her voice was different this time, less desperate, more controlled, like she had rehearsed this conversation in her head before calling. "Can we meet?" "No." She was silent for a moment, then tried again. "Just for a few minutes. There's something I need to tell you." I almost hung up, but something in her tone, something between urgency and hesitation, made me pause. I sighed. 1 hour, at the cafe near my office. When I arrived, Sarah was already there, sitting by the window, stirring a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked up when I walked in, her face carefully composed, but her fingers trembled slightly as she set down the spoon. I sat across from her, folding my hands on the table. "Talk." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it toward me. I raised a brow but didn't touch it. "What is this?" "Proof." Her voice was quiet. "That I never used you for your money." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "You expect me to believe that?" She exhaled, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Just open it." Against my better judgment, I did. Inside was a stack of documents, bank statements, transfers, property records, and one thing stood out immediately, a series of payments, made from her account to mine. I frowned, flipping through the pages. "What is this?" Sarah swallowed hard. "I started transferring money back to you months ago." I stared at her, trying to piece together what she was saying. She took a shaky breath. "I know what it looks like, Robert. I know I made mistakes, but I was trying to fix them." I shook my head, unable to understand. "Then why the hell were you still seeing Peter?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I was stupid," she admitted. "Because I was angry. I thought, if I could prove that I didn't need you, that I could handle things on my own, then—" She trailed off, but I understood what she meant. She wanted control. She wanted to prove that she wasn't dependent on me, but at the same time, she had been quietly trying to repay everything she had taken. I leaned back, staring at her. "And what? You thought I'd find out and forgive you?" She flinched. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said coldly, "because you're not getting it." Her breath hitched, and for the first time, I saw real regret in her eyes. Not the kind that came from getting caught, but the kind that came from realizing what she had lost. She bit her lip, voice barely above a whisper. "I loved you, Robert. I—" Closed my eyes briefly, feeling something deep inside me tighten. Then I stood up, shoving the envelope back toward her. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me." And with that, I walked away. I thought that was the end of it. That after our meeting at the cafe, Sarah would finally accept that there was no fixing what she had broken. But some people don't let go easily. And Sarah, she never knew when to stop. It started with small things. A few messages I ignored, a few missed calls I let go unanswered. Then mutual friends started reaching out saying Sarah wanted to talk, wanted to make things right. I didn't respond. Then, one night, I walked into my restaurant, the one I had taken from her, and found Sarah sitting at a table in the far corner, a glass of wine in front of her, waiting. She looked up when I entered, her eyes searching mine. But I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge her. I walked past her table without hesitation, heading straight to the back office. I heard her get up, heard the sharp click of her heels as she followed. "Robert!" she called, her voice carrying through the dimly lit space. Please, I sighed, pushing open my office door. Sarah, go home. She didn't. Instead, she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I turned to face her, my patience thinning. What do you want? She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her purse. A second chance. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think this is a game? You think I can just forget what you did? I was wrong, she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. I should have never lied to you. I should have never taken your money. I should have never... She swallowed hard. I should have never let you go. Something inside me twisted, but I ignored it. I shook my head, my voice cold. You didn't let me go, Sarah. You threw me away. She flinched. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. And now what? You realized you lost something good and suddenly you want it back? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't let myself feel anything for them. Robert, I cut her off. You didn't love me. You loved the life I gave you, the comfort, the security. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Tell me. Something, Sarah. If I hadn't bought this restaurant, if I hadn't taken back everything you took from me, would you still be standing here? She opened her mouth, but no words came out, and that was my answer. I scoffed, shaking my head. You don't miss me, Sarah. You miss what I provided for you. She let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. That's not true. Isn't it? I stepped back, my voice void of emotion. Then why are you still with Peter? Her. Lips parted, but again no answer. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I walked to the door, pulling it open. We're done here. She stared at me, as if trying to find something in my face that would make me change my mind, but there was nothing left to give. After a moment, she swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. Then she lifted her chin as if trying to salvage whatever dignity she had left and walked past me without another word. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to, because for the first time in years, I felt free. It was over. For the first time in years, Sarah was no longer a part of my life. No more phone calls, no more messages, no more desperate attempts to fix what she had broken, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I thought of her. I felt nothing. It was liberating. I threw myself into my work, expanding my business, making sure that every piece of my success belonged solely to me. No baggage, no ghosts from the past. Then, one evening, I walked into my restaurant, and saw her. Not Sarah, Hazel. She sat at the bar sipping a cocktail, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulder as she laughed at something. The bartender said. I hadn't seen her in years. She turned her head slightly and her eyes landed on me. A slow smile curved her lips. Well, she said, setting down her drink. If it isn't the man of the hour. I smirked, stepping closer. Didn't expect to see you here. She tilted her head playfully. Didn't expect you to own this place. I chuckled. A lot's changed. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Yeah, I heard. I raised a brow. And? She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. And I was wondering, have you changed, Robert? I held her gaze, considering the question. Had I? Once, I had given my heart to the wrong person. I had let myself be used, deceived. And when it all came crashing down, I had walked away, refusing to look back. But now I was stronger, wiser. I knew what I wanted, and more importantly, what I wouldn't tolerate. So I smiled at Hazel, a real smile, and said, Why don't you find out? She laughed, shaking her head. Smooth. I took the seat next to her, signaling for a drink, and just like that, the past faded into the background, where it belonged, because I had finally moved on.